I'm here.
Yes, Edna. So Edna, as a young woman and also having to interact with peers that are of your age, we do note that young people often face the harshest consequences when HIV prevention programs lose funding. How do you think the uncertainty around PrEP access is affecting confidence and trust of young women living with HIV in Eastern Africa and beyond?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of young women, and I think it's a very big responsibility, especially with the circumstances that are at our hands. If I have understood you correctly, how is this cutting fund affecting the trust of young women, especially those living with HIV? Am I correct?
Exactly.
Thank you. To start with, I think as a young woman living with HIV, the first thing that I see, and I see the fear in my community, and I see the situation in my community in terms of understanding the whole dynamic of living with HIV is the high rising number in discrimination. Just with the announcement of the stop order, what I saw was how much my community is misinformed on what really means living with what it really means to live with HIV, because PrEP provided hope and understanding, especially to the discordant couple, that one is living with HIV and the other is not living with HIV. Now, let's say we face challenges in the accessibility and the provision of PrEP services to this discordant couple. Now the questions rise: how will we go forward? So there will be a rising number in discrimination, especially to young women living with HIV. And I'd like to add this into the center. I know as a young woman living with HIV, we face challenges, but I think there might be different challenges for those that we were born with HIV and those that acquire HIV in recent years. To me, throughout the years, as you're living from a young child towards adulthood, you face different challenges, but as some sort of protective mechanism, you identify these gaps and how to deal with them as you grow up with age. Well, these who are newly affected with HIV, perhaps PrEP was the hope that they have, that the PrEP was a hope that they had towards a normal living with negative partners. Now that we're removing this from the equation, how do they go forward? I hope we are seeing the magnitude of this situation in our hands. But also, I would like to touch based on rising number of new HIV infections, as and Miss Yvette, we usually call her Auntie Posey, has spoke about. To mean, we know the statistics on the numbers of HIV acquisition among adolescent girls and young women. And if we look closer into the situation, some of these new acquired HIV infections are influenced with misplaced trust, are influenced with an equal power balance within the relationship. So to those young ladies that are in relationships that they cannot say no to sexual activities without using protection, where is this leaving them at? For the situation in Tanzania, we had oral PrEP at service, although it was not fitting all the needs in the diversity of women or young women in the community, but it helped in one way or the other. Now that, let's say, we face challenges into accessibility and acquisition of PrEP, so there will be a rising number in HIV infection among HYW. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you, Miss Edna, for the contributions to the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I pick from Edna that without PrEP, there is no hope for young people. Without PrEP, we are seeing that there's a lot of fear. We're also seeing discrimination. But we have also seen in the current context of the funding freeze and termination of critical contracts, including HIV prevention contracts by the Trump administration, the community is misinformed. We are also seeing that cases of stigma and discrimination among discordant couples being highlighted by Edna. Edna also critically submits that the young people who are not living with HIV, exclusion of PrEP from the equation, where does that place them? Especially amid these issues around having no trust in relationships, unequal power balance between the adolescent girl and young women and their sexual partners. Ladies and gentlemen, we will continue, but I also urge participants of this X space, if you have any contributions, comments, kindly feel free to drop them in the comment section. Now, I want to check in. Our third speaker is not on the call, and I would like to circle this back to Yvette. You did highlight very good insights around the Choice Manifesto and what we stand to put at risk, especially when we do not have HIV prevention choice not funded. Amid this, the current context, what in your opinion would be the ideal ways you think would work, we would hold our governments and global health donors accountable when they fail to fund HIV?
I think our host went off. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So I think we would, first of all, our governments cannot afford HIV prevention as it stands. There is no African government apart from South Africa, Malawi, no, South Africa, Malawi, Zambia, and a very few other countries that actually pay for HIV prevention services. So our governments would need for us to advocate much more vigorously for them to include HIV prevention. However, we need to hold accountable those those partners that are with us in HIV prevention to ensure that we continue this fight. I don't think this is something any government of ours can really at this point do on their own, but as per the Choice Manifesto, every single HIV prevention method that was tested in any other African country needs to become accessible to the communities where it was tested, and most importantly, to the trial participants. So we are in a catch-22 situation currently where most of the study sites are closed in our countries. People cannot access the HIV prevention drugs and methods that they are used to. And I hear the young, is it Edna? Edna's call for us to think around when PrEP is not available in the communities, what's going to happen to those discordant couples, to those young people who have been depending on PrEP to prevent, you know.
Last, as per the moderator spoke and I heard, I'll touch on two bases. One, what should be done, and second, what have we done in terms of PrEP acceptability and usage with youth, especially adolescent girls and young women. In terms of implementation studies, upon to my knowledge, as so far, we do not have implementation on DVR, Kabele, or lenacapavir as of currently. We only have implementation of PrEP, oral PrEP, meaning the pills. So, what we have done to increase accessibility and demand in terms of PrEP, oral PrEP that we have in Tanzania, one was increasing AGYW leadership in advocacy in HIV response advocacy and leadership to mean, since AGYW are the ones that are highly affected with new HIV acquisition, let them be part of the decision-making tables informing which interventions may be highly needed by them to reach a wider demand in terms of usage of oral. Additionally, I'd like to touch base on Empower Her, which was a project we have implemented in 2024 under their organization. What I have learned with this, there are spaces that have been placed for AGYW for them to inform their decisions, but you can find they're mostly utilized by people that are not, let's say, youth in general. So having youth in these spaces had influenced a wider knowledge transmission. To say this, we identified, for context, we identified champions that we assisted in networking and linkage to advocacy opportunity, where they went and shared their challenges and recommendation on what to be done. As a result, we got a wider response for youth, especially AGYW, even after the project has ended. In the groups, in the WhatsApp groups that we have created, we see these young leaders take initiative in advocacy, in giving out services, to linking to services on other youth. So my context was, let young leaders lead in what we want in terms of intervention, in terms of service provision. Additionally, advocacy, 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 advocacy. We are here in advocacy and in the work that we are doing because we have seen the facts, we have seen the numbers in HIV acquisition. I heard from executive director of AVAC, I think it's this week, and he said advocacy is about evidence. We have seen the evidence in terms of HIV acquiring, and that's why we are carrying HIV advocacy and HIV response with the magnitude that there is. With increased advocacy, there's been an increased wider knowledge giving to youth, knowing on the existence of PrEP, that youth now know that there is such a thing as oral PrEP, that I can go to my healthcare facility and it's zero cost to me, and I can be given to protect me against newer HIV infection. So we see even ladies that are in GBV romantic relationship, now they have an opt to PrEP as an alternative to protecting themselves against new HIV virus. So advocacy has really helped us in reaching the desired goals in terms of PrEP using. Last but not least is peer-to-peer service provision. We have seen a bigger acceptability when the service or advocacy is brought by a more open to ask those questions that they seem maybe unethical or do not conform to the regular norms, but they really want to know. So pushing peer-to-peer advocacy also has helped us to get returning users of PrEP in terms of PrEP administering, but also increasing knowledge in PrEP usage and PrEP accessibility and demand. But where I'm really passionate in terms of today's conversation is what should be done. We're already here. We already have this situation in our hands. So what are the ways that we can think around going forward? One, I would recommend increasing advocacy efforts and movement to mean, yes, we have fewer resources at hand, but with the resources that we have, let's increase advocacy and reach to what are the alternatives that are there to safeguard young women or anyone against new HIV acquisition. With me, I'd recommend increase advocacy to AGYW in terms of not only advocacy, but rather creating movements that will last beyond its period. And I'd like to draw example from the movement and the training that I've been on. Example, the Zazi training, the Thrive movement. These movements will give a young woman the audacity and the strength to say no to any sexual activity that does not include protection. This will give them the autonomy and the power to safeguard their health in terms of, no, we cannot do this. And if you don't want to HIV test and STI test, saying no to those forceful and demanding relationships that would risk their health.